So as we mark the 250th birthday of America, it's worth asking, when it comes to AI, what is the sovereign advantage or position for the United States? The first thing to remember is that every country in the world, and I've talked about this a lot, will develop a sovereign strategy, a strategy to make sure that they have some sustainable differentiation, control, and capability as they navigate AI. But we haven't actually talked about the United States, so I thought this was a perfect time to kind of cover that topic, or at least give our point of view about how the United States and AI and sovereignty come together at this 250th birthday of the country. So let's talk about a few things. The first is our sovereign story of the United States is very different and maybe fundamentally different than any other country in the world for a couple of just foundational reasons. And I've talked to leaders and organizations and enterprises in many countries around the world that I've shared with you, and each of them has an interesting combination of capabilities that allow them to kind of get on a path to have an identity that is unique to their country in the AI cycle. But in the United States, the thing that is different is this is where the industry is grounded. This is where the foundation and models are being developed. The core of the technology stack begins here. And while there are plenty of places around the world where that technology stack is extended, we'll describe the source of the innovation, the center of it, at least at scale, is clearly in the United States. And the advantage of that is that it happens here first. It's also important to recognize that just because it happens here first doesn't mean it doesn't happen anywhere else. It just is, we get the privilege of being at the front row of this technology cycle as it is happening. And, that can become a strategic advantage. U.S. companies tend to move faster than maybe other companies in the world, but eventually all companies will move through the AI cycle, and many are doing that globally. More importantly, the disruptions happen here first. I share with you many of the disruptions that we're seeing at Dell, and we're navigating them, and that's very powerful. It allows us first mover advantage, but it also means we have to do a bit more work to work out these issues and ultimately share them and catalyze the rest of the world. But being in the center of the action is a unique position. It has unique responsibilities and unique capabilities. But for me as a technologist, this is a very fast moving and important cycle for humanity, and being in the place where it is actually beginning in many cases, and where it's starting to scale, and where the first problems are exposed, and where the first solutions materialize is actually a very exciting and fundamental capability and identity of the sovereign strategy of the United States. The second is that this is not just the fact that it's happening here as a complete tech stack. One of the things I always tell people, I used to live and work in Silicon Valley, and I've spent the vast majority of my career engaged in the tech industry. And one of the advantages of places like Silicon Valley, for instance, is that it's not just about any one technology, it's the entire tech stack is there. Now, as you know, AI is not about an individual technology. Large language models are important, but so are many other dimensions of the tech stack. And it's impossible to do AI with just hardware or just software or just models or just use cases. It's putting that entire system together that actually makes AI real. And so the other structural advantage or unique identity of the United States is that it's not just about that there are a few interesting elements of the technology stack. The entire tech stack is here, and in many cases, it's here with diversity. If you think about large language models and frontier models, we have a number of extremely good ones competing to be the best, but they're all very good. And depending on what day of the week it is, one can be better than the other. When we think about the overall architectures that are forming, there are many ways to deploy agentic, to build out your data management environment. And in fact, most of those ways are originating within the US tech ecosystem. So, in addition to the fact that this is where the origin story tends to begin, at least in terms of commercialization and scaling of AI, it is also the place where it's not just about one dimension, it's about the entire technology stack. Now, those are great, unique advantages for, let's call it the United States ecosystem and the sovereignty of the country and our unique advantages. But, not everything is perfect. From a governance perspective and a regulatory perspective, I've talked about this quite often. It's quite a mixed bag out there, including in the United States. We have fragmented state-by-state regulation. The federal regulations, I think, are largely well measured, and we're not trying to over-regulate. But the reality is there still isn't in any way, and in any country, to be perfectly honest, coherent national policy that, from a practitioner's perspective, is easy to execute. I've shared, as a chief AI officer of a global multinational company, I have over 1,000 jurisdictions around the world. all telling me conflicting things to do and how I should use AI and what I'm accountable for. That is untenable. And even in the United States, that is still the state. We do not have clarity on the regulatory environment that we need to allow industry and society to move forward in a predictable, secure, safe, and advantaged way. And so while I think we have a fundamental origin story around AI and the beginning of the journey is here, and the fact that the entire journey is here, and those are huge strategic identities for the country, there is still work to be done around figuring out the best way to govern this, to make sure that it is orderly, to make sure that it is safe, and to fundamentally make sure that we are doing this in a way that doesn't just work for the policymaker, but actually translates into the ability for industry and society to move fast and take advantage of this technology and get it into production. That balanced approach is still maybe a dream for most organizations and countries, and the United States is no different. So that's the area we think we need to focus more on. But the bottom line is, overall at 250 years, if you look at the history of innovation in the country, whether it was electricity or aerospace or the internet or cloud computing or mobile, or the amount of technology inflections that have come out of this ecosystem and ultimately influenced and maybe in some cases been done in partnership with the globe, have transformed society over and over again. And now we're seeing it happen with AI. I'm, an eternal optimist about technology. I believe that it is neither good nor bad. It's how you use it. And what we're finding, at least in enterprise use cases and the things that we're working on and the things that we're seeing happen in industry and medical and other areas of society, this is an incredibly powerful technology that will bend the curve in almost every dimension of our society. And the fact that we are at the beginning of it here, it is emerging out of an ecosystem we fully participate in, and the entire ecosystem is forming around it, is just incredibly exciting. And that pattern holds. And quite frankly, as we think about the next generation of technology and the next inflection, it's always built on the previous one. And the foundation of any technology inflection that we're going to see going forward will absolutely be built on the AI capabilities that are originating in the ecosystem that I get the privilege of participating in. And so we have a very, very strong position. The country is in the center of this discussion. It's not exclusively the center, but it is clearly the place where most of it is beginning and where it's scaling from. But now the challenge is execution, keeping governance coherent, making sure that we do this in an organized way, making sure the technology continues to move in the right direction. But the bottom line is it's going to be a very powerful and interesting technology. And it's just another journey of innovation in the 250 years that have marked the United States of America.